So I'm Ruth Schwendinger. I get to work with Prevention Network, and right now I'm working on a program where we're focusing on building capacity with our community coalitions that are addressing substance misuse. Joel?
Thank you, Ruth. I love the cards. That's awesome. I have my little cheat sheets too. Good afternoon, everybody. Joel Hefner. I'm the Prevention and Outreach Coordinator for Community Mental Health Authority of Clinton-Eaton-Ingham. In this capacity, I am the training consultant for Prevention Network. I also do training for the state of Michigan, MDHHS, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, surrounding the Prevention Prepared Communities Training 101 and 201. That is gone live. We have dates. I have those to share, and links I can put in the chat in a minute around accessing those trainings. They are very low cost, full day trainings surrounding how to build and sustain prevention prepared communities throughout the state of Michigan and beyond. We're doing this training for some time now, and can also provide technical assistance through the state of Michigan via that training. So I encourage groups, teams, executive committees to connect. PPC 101 is on April 26th, 8:30 to 4. It'll be a virtual training. The state's still all virtual at this point. We're hoping to get those in the fall or next year, fiscal year, back in person. But April 26th, 8:30 to 4, that registration is live on cmham.org's website. So Community Mental Health Association of Michigan, their training tab website, or within their training tab. And then the PPC 201, which is really about building and sustaining effective community coalitions, is May 24th, 8:30 to 4. And that flyer and information will be live in the next few days. So April 26th, Tuesday, and then May 24th. I promise, very interactive. You'll get to work in teams. You'll come away with practical application tools that will assist your coalitions in doing the work you do. This is not just me talking and sharing about other groups. This is wanting to hear from local communities where they're at and how to move them forward within the strategic planning framework or prevention framework, as well as with data-driven decisions, as well as with communication plans, annual reports, sustainability checklists. I could go on. So that's action-oriented agendas. So that's the frame there, and I'm happy to, I hope to see some of you, and I know we'll be able to accept about 50 per group. I'll try to stretch that as much as we can. If we have a waiting list, that'll give the state the ability to maybe consider additional trainings later this year, or for next fiscal year, do more trainings around the PPC. So thank you, Ruth.
Thank you. I know there's been several people asking for that training specifically. So I did drop the website in the chat box so that people who are looking for that in other trainings from the state can go to cmha.org.
Thank you, Ruth.
So tonight we're talking about sustainability, and the structure for tonight is very similar to everything else. So want to empower you to ask questions, to come up with issues you're encountering, and we can workshop those. So when we're talking about sustainability, and specifically with the focus on our human resources, we're doing this in the context of the strategic prevention framework. And everything with this program is focused on capacity building. But sustainability and cultural competence are woven into the strategic planning or prevention framework. And so I want to recognize that sustainability happens at every single level, all of the time, as does cultural competence. And so when we're talking about that tonight, just keep it in mind that this is an ongoing effort, and it's something that we can look for support from other agencies, but for the most part, when I'm looking at and looking for resources that talk about sustainability within the SPF, it just says, do it. And so I wanted to dig in a little bit more tonight and hear from you all. What are the things that you're encountering, and how can we help you overcome that? Or what are the things that you're doing that are working really well right now when it comes to sustainable efforts? And so before we get into what I have prepared, I want to open it up and invite you to introduce yourselves if you would like, and we'll tag team this. So just a quick game of tag, and I've already introduced myself. Paige, you've seen this before. I'm tagging you. So once you've introduced yourself, tell me one thing that made you smile today, and then tag somebody else.
Paige George, Southline Community Coalition. Thing that made me smile today is I went to a senior center to onboard a full new board member, and there was just a lot of seniors there, and they're just fun. Older people are just hilarious. So I kind of stuck around for a little bit of bingo and had a great time. Lauren, you're up.
Hi, I'm Lauren Reed. I'm from the Grand Traverse County Drug Free Coalition, and I was happy that the sun came out for a few minutes today up here. And I will tag Barbara.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barb Towner, and I work with the Chippewa Valley Coalition for Youth and Families. I don't work usually on Wednesdays, but I'm excited to be here today. But what made me happy today was also the sunshine. But I also went to a life bar class, and that's challenging but fun.
You said a life bar class?
Yeah, like it's a bar class where you work on a pole in a bar, and it's a workout. So it was fun.
All right.
Yep.
I see Maurice joined us. Barbara, do you want to tag somebody who's next for an
Wanda, how about you?
Hi, my name is Wanda Kemp, and I am co-director for Kids at Hope. And something that made me smile today was hearing a newborn cry. It just made me think of the beauty of life, just to hear the newborn baby cry.
Nice.
Wanda, do you want to tag Kelly or Maurice?
Kelly, I'm sorry.
I'm Kelly from Santa Lake County Community Mental Health and the Prevention Network. And what made me smile today was meeting a representative from Hope Church in Marlette. And I have the honor of teaching all of their staff mental health first aid on Saturday. And we had a really nice conversation. I'm really, really looking forward to that. And I'm sorry, who just logged on?
Mr. Maurice.
Maurice.
Okay, so I'm what's the question? Because I didn't quite hear it. I think I grabbed it, but I want to be sure.
We're inviting you to introduce yourself and
Okay.
share one thing that made you smile today.
Okay, my name is Maurice Berry. I am owner operator of Noon and Night Studio, director of Community That Cares Task Force. And something that made me smile today was hearing from my son.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for sharing, everybody. One of the things that helps with sustainability is when we all come in with similar expectations. And so that's why we share our learning objectives up front. So today we're going to talk about creating a culture for growth. We're going to talk about learning to match people's passion with their ability. We're going to recognize why people don't engage, and hopefully you'll engage with me and we can talk about how to overcome that. And then we're going to identify personal sources of support. And thank you, Joel, for adding those in the chat box. For those who have just recently joined, we have some training opportunities coming up. Invite you to check out cmham.org website for those training opportunities. So when we're talking tonight about sustainability within the strategic planning framework, what are those things that you're trying to sustain? And this is going to be an interactive dialogue so that we can continue to share about those things. So I've put a couple things up here. What right now in your coalitions or in your groups are you working on sustaining? What's taking the most effort? Barbara?
Hi. Well, I look at all those and all of those are equally important. I'm going to start with the partnerships. If we didn't have our partnerships with our community partners, we wouldn't exist. We are 1.5 people staff, and the partners, starting from the executive board onto our committees, and are just a huge part of our coalition partnerships. And the programs, of course, ongoing. We're sustaining all of these things right now. Outcomes, we just did the MyFi, so that's a huge undertaking. And MyFi survey for the high schools. We're reporting out all the data right now. So that's generating more programming issues and identifying some real areas that we can explore for this year and next year. Awareness, I'm going to assume that means like, does that mean community?
Within the community, right?
Okay, so people are aware of us. We've been around a while, but right now I would say our awareness is it's within our own network, because we do a lot of email blast and community newsletters and stuff. So that's good. And fundraising is always a big one. I just asked a partner the other day for some sponsorship on some t-shirts, because we're going to have to start, really looking at different ways that we can do funding, in addition to our current strategies that we have in place on that. So I think all of them, is what we're sustaining, and they're all just all the core, the key elements.
Well, and CVS has been around for 32 years, something like that.
It has, it is. Chippewa Valley Coalition has been around in one form or another for almost 30 years. So
when we're talking about sustainability and we're talking about what are you actively working on, I want everybody to recognize that we're all at different places. And so I want to ask Lauren the same question. Lauren, what are you putting the most effort into sustaining right now?
I would say maintaining and growing the partnerships with our schools. And then that goes along with the programs that we're able to run in there. We've had a lot of staff changes, both at the administrative and teacher level. And so some of those relationships that we had built up, we had to start fresh. So I would say that's definitely taking the most time.
Okay. And Paige, would you like to share what you're focusing on right now, your most efforts with sustaining?
Apologize. I'm eating popcorn. It's my lunch. I played my bingo a little past long, so I apologize. I am working on building awareness. We are a non-identity in South Lyon, so we're slowly getting up that. And partnerships, just trying to find people who are open to hearing what we have to say and coming alongside us. Slowly, I pounded the pavement this past weekend at a fun fair called Carnival in South Lyon, and just went around and talked to people. This is who we are, and we'd like you to kind of join us. So watch out for us on Facebook. But those are the two things: awareness and partnership, definitely.
All right. Maurice, do you want to share what you're working on as far as within communities that care?
Absolutely. Our main focus right now is homelessness. It was an undetected homeless problem in Albion, and once I became aware of it, I started partnering with the people that run the shelter in Battle Creek. So we have built partnerships with the homeless shelter, with the women, domestic violence. And so I'm working on sustaining those relationships and building awareness to our homeless problem in our area.
And kind of addressing it through new opportunities, not your programs necessarily, but creating those partnerships in order to sustain housing resources, right?
Absolutely. And I'm eating lunch too. That's why I'm not on camera.
All right. All right. Wanda, would you like to share? And at any point, if somebody doesn't want to, they can just say no, and that's fine. But Wanda, what are you putting the most effort into sustaining right now?
Excuse me. Maurice and I pretty much work together, so it's been the homelessness and also program, because we're trying to get more programs in the community, especially for our youth. There's been a lot of at-risk activity that's been taking place, dealing with the youth getting into, been a lot of chaos in our little city. And I really feel that partnership with the schools and programming can intervene in that.
Just having that better network of support for the students and for the young people is pretty critical. Joel, nobody talks about outcomes and funding except our most experienced coalition member here. And I'm wondering, I recognize that right now in Michigan, funding is not as high a priority. There seems to be more funding available. But can you talk about outcomes a little bit, Joel, and why and how we should be trying to sustain those outcomes rather than focusing exclusively on programs or funding or awareness?
Sure. No, and I love the responses, and I really appreciate what this shares and what this shows, because for me, just thinking, and I'd like everybody to think about the last few years, how much of this has changed with certain items that are identified here. And for me, partnerships stood out by far because of the transition and turnover of staffing in our local areas, in our leadership, executive on down. But the partnerships have kind of had to been rebuilt so then we can continue to sustain and promote our programming, provide awareness, connect with funding, and produce those outcomes. So that I just like how this is laid out. It gives people an idea of the why of sustainability, because there's so much going on that you need to sustain, and it's all right here and beyond. Partnerships, programs, outcomes, awareness, and funding. As far as outcomes, I think for me, it's the accountability factor and promoting your worth. So outcomes for me are a part of the programming, a part of the partnerships, part of the system that you're creating. And if you're not promoting your outcomes or communicating your outcomes or even aware of your outcomes annually or biannually, so every 2 years, maybe every 1 to 3 years, ideally, it's a gap for me. And it's a gap in the community of knowing your worth, your value, how much value added you are to the community. So, if it's program outcomes, excellent. If it's system-wide outcomes or partnership outcomes or, things that you're working on, planning outcomes, you've gotten together like Maurice's group and Wanda's group talking about homelessness. That's an outcome that you're moving a committee forward or a group forward specifically on homelessness and identifying needs, resources, gaps, potential plans, and programming.
Yeah.
Does
And
that
all
help?
of it ties together. All
Yeah.
of this is, and everybody, I asked, what are you working the most on? So I don't in any way think that any of you are neglecting any of this. I think you're all doing a really good job because you're recognizing that there are so many different parts to this work. But what I really appreciate everybody said is the partnerships, and everybody highlighted that. So everybody recognizes that coalition building, that prevention work is really all about the people. And so when we sustain those partnerships, those relationships, those human resources being the most important, everything else is going to follow. So if we're focused on supporting and growing those relationships and the people that we're working with, everything else will follow.
Great.
Okay, so I grew up in Iowa, mostly a farming community, and I don't want people to get bored, so I'm going to switch direction here real quick. I'm going to give us a lesson in agriculture. So Kelly's laughing at me. What are the things that a plant needs to grow? And this is not a multiple choice. I'm expecting somebody to blurt out the answers.
Soil,
Soil.
Waters.
Unlike
Seed,
Seeds,
Sunshine.
Fine, just like me.
seeds.
Seeds.
Someone to cultivate it.
Mhm. So I want us to consider our coalitions, our groups, as a field, and we are cultivating the seeds that have been planted. Whoever's already at the table, that's who we're working with right now. When we're talking about the stakeholders, whether they're actually at the table or not, we want them to be involved. They're part of the process. Everybody wants to stay in their lane. Everybody wants to, for the most part, keep their head down, get through their day with the least amount of struggle. But when we're talking about growth and we're focused on the human resources, there are some similarities between that and agriculture. So we have the environment, we have the culture, and we're going to talk about that as the soil in a little bit. The other things that plants need to grow, that people need to grow, is space. We aerate the soil. We aerate the soil so that there's room for growth, right? When oftentimes these things happen in meetings, but you need to make sure that we're creating the space for people to be engaged. Oftentimes you'll have some people dominate a meeting where you'll have other people who don't participate at all. And so you'll notice during these workshops, one of the things I do is I call people out, and Barbara learned that really quick because I like to put people on the spot, and sometimes that makes people uncomfortable, and I'm okay if you tell me no. I'm okay if you stay off camera. I'm okay if you just say I'd rather not, and that's fine. But when we're talking about involving people and creating space, we need to aerate the soil by intentionally asking people, what are your thoughts on this? You know, what has your experience been? Because the benefit of having a coalition is the diversity, the diverse experience, the diverse knowledge, the diverse perspectives that we all bring. And so you have to create space, create that air for people to share their knowledge, their experience, their thoughts, their questions, and their resources. If you're not getting that in coalition meetings, if you have people who aren't coming to the table, or if you have people who don't participate when they're there for one reason or another, seek them out individually and have those conversations. It's important to create the space for people to engage. Fertilizer. I'm not a big fan of fertilizer, just in general, but it's important. What does fertilizer have to do with growing things? It helps adds nutrients to the soil. It brings people along. It helps balance the pH sometimes of the soil. So when we're fertilizing, oftentimes that involves something that is somewhat unpleasant, or it's something that when we're talking about working with people, I would suggest that fertilizing involves things like compliments and praise. And so when we're talking about building our capacity and recognizing the value of human relationships, we need to be liberal with the fertilizer. We need to be very liberal with the genuine praise of, I recognize what you're bringing to the table. And don't just tell the person, tell their supervisors, tell their colleagues, tell the public, advertise that. When you have great partnerships, let other people know about it and celebrate those in a very public way. And if you're going to do it in a very public way, make sure that you have the okay to do that. Some people don't like the attention. Some people would rather you use mulch. And when we're talking about mulch in agriculture, why do people use mulch? And I'm going to lean on Kelly for this one, because I know she's works with farming people.
Well, I laughed because I live in the country, but I'm a city girl and I don't know much about farming itself, but mulch is an insulator. Mulch can keep cold out and moisture in.
It keeps the sun out too, so that if there are things growing around the plants that you don't want to grow, it reduces drastically the amount of weeds that come up. And oftentimes when we're working with a group of people, we're working in a community where there are a lot of issues we're all dealing with from a lot of different perspectives. That is a strength, but it also can be a detriment. So when we're talking about identifying our priority issues, the mulch really helps by creating a focus and keeping us laser focused on our objectives. When we're using mulch in a meeting, we might talk about it in ways that acknowledge that there are problems in our communities that this group that we're a part of right now, this meeting we're facilitating, is not going to focus on. There are other groups within the community who may be dealing with that, or like with the Albion community, if nobody else is dealing with it, then we need to mulch everything else and focus on this one urgent issue. And so when we're recognizing there are times where we need to create space for people to engage, there are times when we need to fertilize, and there are times when we need to mulch. And that helps us to focus in on our priorities. The fertilizer helps us to celebrate those successes, and aeration helps us to make sure that we're hearing from everybody, that we're being inclusive. Because if people have that space that's been created for them, they will share. I want to talk a little bit about how do we take steps towards sustainability within our community, within our coalitions. We've talked consistently throughout the C3 programs about you have to know your purpose, you have to have a clear identity, you have to know your mission. This part of it is about knowing your community. You have to know and have a clear definition of who is included, if that's a geographic area, if it's a population group, who are you targeting? Who needs to be a part of what you're doing? Who are the stakeholders? So you have to know your community and you have to knit your community together. And everybody talked about partnerships, and that really is essential. That really is the key to all of it. So when we're building sustainability, there's 3 steps here that we want to use to keep people engaged, to get people engaged. We want to attract them, we want to retain them, and we want to help them develop, provide opportunities for people to grow. So when we're talking about knowing your community, how do you attract people? So I'm going to ask Barbara, because you're already unmuted, how do you attract people to Chippewa Valley?
Well, I think that there has to be the true word of a partnership. And also, I'm thinking about the community sectors also, because we did 2 rounds of drug-free communities. And so we were required, as most coalitions are, to get into every single sector out there. It only takes one partner in each of those sectors to then get another partner. I would start there. How to really attract them? I think just going and actually presenting who you are, and listening to, where they sit on the bus. Like when we went into our township offices, like for example, it's like our city offices. Now we have a relationship with our supervisors. We have 2 counties, Clinton Township and Macomb. We had to go in and do a one-on-one and tell them all about us and do a full presentation, and they could see the value of us, and build that over time. I hope that helps. I mean, attracting it's an interesting word, but it's about truly also, targeting, in my opinion, too. Who do you want to be a partner with? Your health department, your hospitals, your churches, again, the sectors. And then I always believe in the sales philosophy of, if you have a warm contact, if you already have a contact, then it makes it easier to get into a meeting and so forth. I don't know if that helps. I don't want to go on and on.
That's great. You talked about attracting through having that personal connection. You
Mhm.
talked about going in and listening.
Mhm.
And that is a critical step because oftentimes people will go in and say, this is who we are. This is what we're about. We know we're doing great things. Why don't you join us? And they don't understand because there's not a personal connection with your mission and their mission. And so when we're talking about attracting partnerships, one of the things, the very first thing we have to do is listen. What are their needs, right? We might just assume that the hospital is dealing with substance misuse, but maybe their priority right now is postpartum depression or obesity or something else. And so if it's not in their top 3, they're not going to be adding programs. So we need to go in and we need to listen to what their priorities are. And yes, there is overlap between substance misuse prevention and every other sector. But if it's not also a priority for that particular office or that group, it's not going to be a priority at this point. Move on, find somebody else.
And it overlaps, what you said, Ruth, is very important. It overlaps with their mission too. For example, we work with Henry Ford Hospital. We work with the school health segment of that. They actually are partners with us and go in and teach part of our Smart Moves program because it aligns with their mission.
Mhm.
So it's a mutually beneficial situation.
Mhm. When we're talking about relationships, what attracts people? We're talking about relationships. It's the same basic human concepts. It's passion, right? You have to find a shared passion. And if you don't have that, it's not going to be an easy road, right? Passion makes things start really quickly. So when you're trying to attract people in a relationship as a professional one, connect with their passion. Find people who are passionate about reaching the same people you're reaching, about the same mission, about whatever it is. Somebody else have something to say on that point?
I will.
As far as, go ahead, Wanda.
Sorry. I totally agree. Sometimes it's not even what you have to offer, but what they have to offer you. Because the person that I reached out to, they have this community, they have this kids launching program to allow youth to start their own businesses. And so just to be able to tell them that our youth lack certain things and you have something that we need. And so that therefore they were interested in bringing that to Albion to provide it to our youth, but also sometimes letting people know what you need can be part of that attraction as well.
That leads wonderfully into our next step, but I want to give Maurice a chance to respond first. So remember that give people the opportunity to be needed. So Maurice, were you going to share?
Yes, I was going to ride off of what Wanda said, and also that focusing on our homeless coalition work, that is exactly what our purpose was showing the need for the services offered through our partnering, and that we also needed them, and that the passion was mutual shared throughout the community. So yes, building and connected to people that have the same passion, or you're focusing on the same passion, definitely builds strong relationships.
It makes it a lot easier to get started, but that takes us into the next step, which is retaining the people you have, right? So we want to match what they can do with what we're asking them to do. Does that make sense? People want to be useful. They want to make a difference. Match what they're offering with what you need. If somebody's really gifted at building media campaigns, put them on that job. If somebody's really great at making connections with seniors, send them out to the senior center, right? If somebody has the ability to throw together a finance report in 10 minutes after looking at 15 pages of documents, I want them as my treasurer, right? When we're talking about retaining people, people need to be recognized for what they bring to the table. Coalition building is not about us serving other people. It's about us coming together to meet the mutual needs with our mutual resources. And that's what coalition building is bringing multiple resources to the table to meet a shared need. And so what Wanda said really just tied right into that, and I don't feel like I need to go into it any further. Thank you. The last step here in knitting your community closer and continuing to build and grow is to help people develop new skills. Human nature is to get bored with what you've done for years and years. And I want to throw it over to Joel because he's looking bored right now. What are the things that we can do to help coalition members build new skills, Joel?
Don't say that, Ruth. This is great stuff. I like how it's laid out. For me, it gets me to think about how I operate and how I support my coalitions and other boards and initiatives I'm involved in. For me, the progression here, and I'll speak to that, is I attract via the message, and the message sells itself. So behavioral health happens to everyone. Substance use disorder is a major issue. Underage drinking is a public health crisis. Those things attract, I retain, so I don't let anybody go. When I connect to an individual or an agency, I connect and attach and retain. That's the number one priority. And then the third level is develop new skills and help foster them in their growth. I just had a conversation earlier with another coordinator that we were talking about sharing messages and sending emails and email blasts to your network and hoping they do the same where they share it to another network, because we're all connected in some ways, but we don't have all the networks in our emails. We don't have all the staff and professionals connected on our emails. We're hoping that others do the same with the messaging that we share, but they don't. A lot of times my emails or some of our emails fall to them and they forget that they could share as easy as pressing a button to their networks. So we almost have to develop the skill and promote the skill around making sure those folks are the extension of our message. They continue to carry the message. So it just doesn't stop with you. I'm hoping that all my community coalition members share this information with their staff, peers, and networks. So, but we've had to train them. We almost have to develop that skill because folks, again, think that it was just meant for them and it stops there. So again, for me, it's the latter. It's really important. For me, it's the message sells itself. When you have a great message and great information and resources to share, you want to retain everyone you connect to because those are the partnerships that are so impactful. And then you're developing those folks over time to understand their role and function within the coalition. So I think that's where it stands for me.
Retention is really difficult because priorities shift. And so I want to take another look at that. Why don't people engage? Why do people step back from the table? What are those things that you hear? And this is an opportunity for you to just blurt it out. What are those things you hear for why people don't engage or why they take a step back?
I have a quick question for Joe, if you don't mind, before you move on. Are the people, when you said far as being able to pretty much spread the good news, are they aware that that can be done? Because I think that was part of my problem in the beginning, because you're in this group and you're like, am I going against confidentiality, sharing this, telling this? So I don't think people are always aware of what they can share. So
exactly. I think that's a big part of it, depending on the topic. It could be DEC protocols for, child protective services, foster care, things like that. It could be homelessness. It could be substance use disorder treatment data for your community. So you do have to be sensitive to that, but the majority of information that prevention shares is entirely public. It's promoted in annual reports. It's communicated by MDHHS. It's a part of our data and annual reporting to our boards. It is, for the most part, very public, and it needs to be shared with the public in as many ways as possible. So that's a great point. And it's kind of to my point of your community members and coalition members don't realize or don't understand that their role is to do the same that you did, or do a similar role as the staff do, is sharing and connecting your resources with their networks. Because, you know, the separation, Kevin Bacon. I forget the line wrong.
7 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
7 degrees. Thank you. 7 degrees of separation, or Kevin Bacon. That's it. But if they don't understand their role, I mean, it's so odd. I send an email and I know a coalition coordinator is receiving that email, and I'm also on that coalition. I send the email, await them to share it with their group. And this happens many, many times. They don't do it. I'm over here waiting for that to receive it in another network, and I don't see it. No reasoning. I don't understand. So I've communicated and had conversations with those staff. I'd really appreciate it if there's any way that in between your meetings, you can share the information surrounding, because it's pertinent for your audience. It's relevant. So I have to, again, assist them in sometimes their role and function as a communicator, as a promoter, in what should be a known task, but it's not. So I feel like it's not HIPAA. We're not getting into that realm if we're not sharing personal identification or numbers that are into those categories or arenas. But for the most part, the information we're sharing, it's endless. I can have my family members share this information with their networks, whoever it may be, because it's usually access to services, programming for youth or young adults or older adults. It's infographics. It's just community resources in general, ancillary supports. We can go on and on. We have amazing information that everyone needs to know about, because it could be a family member, could be a student, a friend, a son, a daughter, an uncle, and aunt that are impacted by behavioral health issues as a whole, or more specifically, substance use disorder issues.
And that's part of the hard part. And I know we need to move on, but that's part of the difficult part here that we do have, is getting the information out, because it's like, even whether it's events or whatever, people always find out about it after it happens.
Yeah.
So you're right, that email blast to getting it out, and then it's like, oh, I wasn't even aware that existed. I didn't know that was there, or I didn't know that was available. So, and that is the hard part of trying to get it out. So that would be awesome to get your blast, like you said, and it just trickles down. Start at the top and it just trickles down out through all sorts of community and organizations. I'm sorry, Ruth.
I'm gonna add this one thing. Ruth, if I could just add one thing to that. I agree 100%. And that takes time to build those networks. But if your coalition members, or even with your executive board, you ask them, and you got to, like Joel was saying, you have to ask them over and over again, please share with your networks. And you say it right on top, please share with your networks, and then it just becomes routine, I think, more so. But you ask your coalition members, and then you talk to them if you're having coalition meetings. You tell them that's one of the needs we need you to do. You just keep drilling that over and over again, because the best kept secret is not good for anybody. So we need to get that out.
Well said, Barbara. Well said. I think that's great. It's so funny because I made an assumption. This was on my issue. This was one of my issues as a coordinator, that this was going to be shared. And that was not the case. After time, I realized that. And so I took steps to address it. And I appreciate you saying it like that, because it is something you have to almost reiterate weekly, monthly with your groups. And that is the key of prevention, is message saturation. We will really impact community populations at a much greater level if we can get this information out to the masses. My whole thing of prevention and what I've heard and what I talk about and people that I've known a long time is the hardest place to get, and you guys know this, is in the home. So the hardest place to get our message is in the home. Well, I'm in a home right here. I can share it with my parent. You know, I'm a coach. I can share information in those realms, in those venues, as you know, connected to a school district and so on. It's like that's the key to prevention in my mind, and how to get your community members to work with you on getting that saturation.
Yeah,
Sorry,
because
Ruth.
the
Good
school
stuff.
district, for example, we partner with the school district, and it is unique in that you can, working with your community relations people, you
Mhm.
know, that's a great asset, a huge asset for us. They can do a messenger to all parents. They could do a messenger to all kids. I mean, that's huge right there. But
Yep.
that doesn't cover your community. That's your school community. So then you got to work with your township people and put things on the township channels, you know?
Yes,
You just take
exactly. I
one,
love it.
you take
And
one
pay-
document and you can take that one document and put it in multiple places.
And this brings us back to the communication plan that we talked about previously, and Paige is working on hers and others are working on those. And I want you to think about those things, because that's been my whole role right now in my world at CMHA. See, I have 3 counties, 500,000 population. I'm trying to connect so many allies and align them with the message. And that is my goal. And I'm talking hospitals, health systems, health departments, school districts, religious associations. I mean, I can go laws enforcement, courts. I mean, we can go on forever. That's the trick. That's the key.
Getting all the sectors. Mhm.
That's right.
But information dissemination is the most basic function of a coalition, and that sometimes you do need to develop that skill of communication with people. For some people, it talks about how do you identify and develop your talking points? What's your elevator speech? Okay, well, maybe we need to update those stats that you've memorized 5 years ago, and just continue to work with people on that. But that's part of knitting your community too, is to recognizing that if your coalition has such a platform, that you should be sharing out all of those other things that your coalition members are doing as well. Because as we said earlier, it is a back and forth, it's a relationship, it's a give and a take. And so people are bringing these opportunities for you to share, whether it's an event or a training or just basic information. That's what our very most basic purpose of a coalition is, information sharing.
I like how you have that knitting, and we're all talking about weaving our communities together and just bringing folks from different venues together in this work. That's great.
Good conversation, good points, good questions. If we're ready to move on, and it's okay if we're not, why do people not engage? And Lauren, you've been sitting very quietly for a very long time.
I would say the most common things during the pandemic, people didn't want to attend another Zoom meeting, or personal lives, they didn't have time to do one more thing. Or if they've joined and then they didn't have anything that really interested them. I would say those are the top 3 maybe for us.
Kelly?
Well, I was going to say, I kind of learned a rough lesson lately about people engaging, and it was simply that a couple of members experienced frustration because things weren't moving as quickly as they would like to see them move. And, you know, it kind of spoke to, so was I clear enough in the beginning? Which I thought I had been, but also, you know, both of these, well, one of these people is a general member of the public, not really associated with any particular organization. And so I think that it's important that volunteers have a clear understanding of like your funds and systems and rules, and you know why sometimes it takes such a long time, and clear expectations, you know, that goal setting, so they understand, you know, precisely, well, here we are and here's where we'd like to be and when.
One of the things that volunteers often don't understand is the strategic planning framework. They think we have an idea, we want to do it, what's stopping us? And if it doesn't fit in with the strategic plan of the coalition, then it doesn't make sense to move forward on that. And everything we do, we want to have it supported by data as well. So I get that. I'm a fairly impatient person, not the most impatient person I know, but fairly impatient by myself. And so I recognize that desire to see results. And so oftentimes when we're working with community members, we need to help them, as I said at the beginning, have clear expectations of this is going to be a process, this is going to take some time, we're in it for the long haul. And during the podcast, that's what Joel was talking about, is this is a marathon, not a sprint. We need to be prepared because it does take a lot of time to develop and plan effective prevention. Yes, we can bring in a speaker and have, you know, community conversations. We can have talks and big name speakers. We can do movies in the park and events that reach a lot of people with prevention messaging. But how do we know if we're being effective? How do we know that we're making good use of our resources that people are bringing to the table to share? So we want to make sure that when we're engaging people, we want to do so in a very thoughtful way. And oftentimes for impulsive or impatient people like myself, it's good to have some short-term goals set aside along with those long-term goals that are identified, so that we can see and measure progress.
I think, oh, go ahead, Barbara.
Just a note on that. I was thinking that, you know, we often say that, you know, when people come to the meeting, it's those people come to the meeting, but the coalition still exists outside of the whole network. So if my prosecuting attorney is not going to come to our meeting, if he sends a person, that's great. But if he's on the email list or multiple people on his staff are, they're still getting our stuff. And they're still, you know, the awareness is still there. So he may think of us as like a resource in his pocket, but he's not going to be completely engaged. Does that make sense? You know, like because he doesn't need us at that time or until we do a alcohol retailers project or something, you know, then it flares up, but he's still I want to say he's still aware.
Yep.
You
There are
know?
different levels of engagement. And we talked about that, having different levels of opportunity for people to engage. And so for those really action-oriented people, you want to have, you know, health fairs and farmers markets and things. They can go out and talk with people. That's what fills them up. That's what they want to do. Or if you have somebody who this is on their radar, it's not currently a priority, they recognize the value of the partnership, continue to keep them engaged with communication. So my question initially here was, why do people step back, or why do people just not engage to start with? I mean, you're in a community of how many thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people? How many people are part of your coalition? The number one reason why people don't engage, nobody's asked them. And Joel, we've talked about this with the communication plan, is we want to have a message that aligns with people's needs so that our mission lines up with their mission and we understand that we're working together toward a shared goal. But for the most part, people don't engage because they haven't been asked. Every opportunity we go out to, we need to have that invitation. Everywhere we go, we want to be able to invite people to join the good work that you're doing. But beyond that, go ahead, Joel.
I'm sorry, that could just be built in, like you're saying. It should be built into your flyers, your Facebook, your communications plan as a tagline. It is a tagline of how can you get more involved. That's great.
Well, how do you end the stigma? Because one thing that I noticed in our community is it's people think it's clicky. So they feel like little clicks. And so they feel disconnected. So
Right.
trying to persuade it that it's not that way is what I have found to be difficult, because yeah, it's just clicky and people don't feel connected to some of the people that are involved, or don't even feel they have their best interests at heart. So it's hard to try to engage them in something with people that they don't trust in relationship. That's really what it is. Not having the trust and trying to build that relationship.
And I feel like you can go around that. There's other people that may be a better fit. But what I would point back to is what Ruth said. I was going to bring up to the levels of engagement. So it's the API framework is what I talk about in PPC 101. It's aware, participatory, and involved. I very honestly, I want the entire community, the entire state of Michigan, the entire US, if we can get there, but the entire community to be aware of our efforts or aware that substance use disorder is an issue. Jump up a level. I want a certain network to be participatory in our efforts and connect and engage with initiatives, referrals, programming, resources, things like that. Jump up another level to the last level, involved. That's the main core group, executive committee, engaged coalition members at your table. So back to other examples, the prosecuting attorney, they can be aware, they can be participatory. There's movement within those three levels. And what I try to say and how I present my coalitions and interact with the partners and the participants is this is I try to set those boundaries and the flexibility of the coalition as best I can. And what this also comes back to is role clarity. If people don't understand their roles, those that are engaged or connected to your group or came once, they will not engage. They will leave if they don't have a clear understanding of their purpose for being there. You may have to help them with that, with the orientation or a sit down, or just how you communicate in the coalitions meetings themselves. But yeah, I agree. The click thing does happen quite a bit. It's certain leaders of certain agencies, and that's the group. And if you don't know those folks, you wouldn't come to the table.
So Wanda, I think Barbara talked about that a little bit, and it was just go to them and listen. And as you said, sometimes it's real, as Joel just said, it's really hard to find a seat at the table. And so you keep chipping away at it. That's what Paige has been doing for the last year and a half, is just chipping away at it. You keep going in, you keep showing up, you keep putting in the work and trying to get the FaceTime. And eventually you'll get in and you'll listen. And when you do, as Joel said, the message, it sells itself. Everybody with brainwaves has mental health issues, right? When we're talking about substance use, that is affecting every single person on the face of the planet. And so find that shared ground, right?
Or go to the next door, because the peer pressure is a part of this too. If you have a health department or a ISD or something that's not engaged, go to the next county, or if you're multi-county or the other ISD, they will be. I mean, it's really hit or miss sometimes. You don't, yes, there's 12 sectors, but again, you can have representation from a variety of arenas and make a coalition very impactful.
Go ahead, Paige.
I also have found, unfortunately, I don't have this problem now, but I hope to have this problem, Wanda, where people do think that it's clicky or whatnot. I challenge people then to ask other people who they don't know to be involved with somebody. Maybe there is an event coming and Susie never works with Bobby very much. Hey, Susie, I'm going to put you and Bobby. Are you guys comfortable? And you two run with the event. I know you guys can do it, and kind of build up that team. But put those people who maybe are on the fringes and invite them to come onto a team. And they might get along just fine and never thought there was a click to begin with. I mean, maybe it was just, like you said, you've never been asked. Maybe if people aren't willing to ask, just kind of like encourage them to kind of come together and seek out other people.
That's a good point. There's two ways to go about it. You can be very direct and go directly to the person who supposedly leads the clique and ask them, this is what we're trying to do. I believe this mission supersedes individual programs and individual personal likes and dislikes. Or you can work around the fringes and draw people in who are willing already and invite them to take a bigger part in it and take a bigger role in that. That's a really good point, Paige.
Also have egos. I hate to say it, but people have egos. Play off that. If Susie is one of the key players and she kind of has her clique, challenge her to bring alongside someone who maybe is valuable, but hasn't had a voice yet or hasn't had a place to be put yet. It's
That's
amazing
a
what
dangerous game to play.
it is.
I would just say, I
But-
lack that social skill to be able to play one person's ego off another.
I think sometimes in my corporate background, that's how I got things done. Someone, it's a scary play, but if someone's really on the fringes and they don't know how to be involved, you ask one of the person who maybe has more experience or confidence, I guess, to kind of bring them alongside and help them get involved, that you believe that they would be great at that and enable them to teach them some things per se.
We have a lot of our community coalition members present at our meetings. So we ask them to do so and we give them some bullet points, but then they also do the research and it gives them a spotlight, and they can spotlight their own agency, and that helps as well. Be interactive.
If they're willing to come in, if they're already a part of it. I want to talk about and what stops people from engaging, and then we can talk about ways we can overcome that. And so the number one reason I hear is just, I have so many other things on my plate I just can't right now. So I want to recognize and help us to recognize the difference between stress, between burnout, and between genuine indifference. Because these are the things that stop people from engaging in my experience. And I hope that you all have had different experiences than I have. I expect you have. But there's different reactions, different responses we should have, depending on what it is that's stopping people. And so when somebody's really stressed out, they have a lot of activity going on, and they're coming back to your request for sharing information or being engaged in some way with, I can't right now, I'm too busy, or they say they'll do something and then, oh yeah, I forgot, I'm sorry. Be very direct with that person. Recognize the value that they have. Recognize, hey, you've done this specific direct thing that impacts our coalition. How can I help you? How can Ruth or Prevention Network, how can we support you right now? Because it needs to be give and take. When you're cultivating relationships, you have to recognize when to back off. The other thing that's plaguing us in prevention is burnout right now. Conversation yesterday morning with somebody who, quite frankly, said, I don't see the point in continuing. Marijuana is legal. There's nothing I'm going to be able to do to change that. Okay.
There's a lot to change.
All right. And Barbara, you're on it, right? Like, do you know that this past initiative that we did decreased youth substance misuse by this amount? And that's where you need to know the value of your coalition. You need to know where your successes are in the past. So make sure if you're going to have that conversation with somebody, you've done your research. And then invite them. Would you like to go with me to the next in-person activity? Whatever it is. You should always know what's next. And so you would just invite them. Would you like to go with me? If somebody's burnt out, oftentimes it's because they're missing that face-to-face interaction with people that you're actually impacting. And so it invites you to point out that, okay, marijuana is legal right now. Tobacco is also legal. We've seen big impacts in the way that youth are using or not using tobacco products. Let's continue to do the good work that we're doing because we know it makes an impact. Or if there's genuine disinterest, like, yeah, that's a great idea. Good luck with that. Not interested, don't care, not on my radar at all, right? You hear that? Paige is nodding really big. What's been your experience with that, Paige?
This past weekend, Carnival is this new thing they just brought to South Lyon. I just walked around for a couple of hours. They had street entertainers, so I just kind of casually talk about what performers doing or the crowds and just introduce myself to people and just kind of get a feel about them, and then led on to, so do you have kids in the school? And this is who I am. And that's how I kind of lead into it. And that's pretty much, oh, that's great. We need that. And then, well, we're looking for people to kind of partner alongside us and join our team here and work with us. And oh yeah, no, but it's a great idea. It was all night. It was all night long.
I like to use just some of the basic knowledge and things that we've learned through youth mental health first aid. Did you know, or through the MyFi surveys recently, did you know that 23% of our middle school students have reported significant signs of depression? Did you know that 40% of students who participated in the MyFi last year in Marquette County had experienced suicidal thoughts in the last week? Like, do you understand how severe this issue is? Like, help people, like, recognize either if it's a personal story or if there's a connection that they have with a family member, recognize that we need to approach this in a trauma-informed way. We don't want anybody to be put in a position where they feel unsafe. But we do need to recognize that this is having a severe impact on each and every one of our communities right now, and we need to take action. And when we're doing prevention effectively, we know we can make a difference. We know we can save lives. There is an urgency that needs to be communicated to people who are disinterested. And so, genuine disinterest, yeah, that's a great idea. We need stuff like that. Good luck. I'm going to go do this. And I'm going to let you know how it goes. So I'm going to go do our next activity, whatever that is. And then I'll come back and let you know how it goes. I'm not asking anything from you, but I plan to follow up with you on that.
And Ruth, that's kind of where I was thinking is what Paige is, interacting with and seeing out there is the reality. And I'd point back to the API. So really, you don't need to ask them for their involvement on, for the general population, those folks that are parents, they have jobs, their job doesn't connect to this work, and they are overwhelmed, with just being parents and bus drivers for their kids. So that's okay. For me, that's like, you support that 100% and you just give them an opportunity to be aware. So it's, well, if it, that's totally understandable. Here's our Facebook page. Here's a screening platform. Here's, other resources. If you ever have anybody that needs services, that's it. You're basically just connecting them to the aware group, and you support that 100%. And you'll get people to move along the continuum based on, their profession, their interest, their willingness, their interest in general. But for me, 95% of the population probably is not going to connect into the participatory or the involved levels. That's because the 95% is the community. That's the general population, but we want them to be connected to the aware. So access line information, Facebook connectivity, because we share a ton of resources on Facebook, and that should be 100% supported. So think about that where it's you kick them down to those other levels and you give them resource and information and support that 100%. And for the aware and the involved and the participatory, that is another level for potentially and most likely professionals that are connected to this work, but also those rare volunteers and general public that want to make a difference. They're ready to go. They're retired, whatever the situation is. Those people are amazing. And I love to get them as volunteers in the events and the initiatives. They want to do stuff. They don't care about the planning necessarily. They want to do stuff. I got a role for them, but I'm not going to push anything on anyone. So it's just a thought of the API really helps with that.
It really does. And I want to move on, but I don't want to move on until Barbara's had a chance to say what you want to say about, marijuana's legal now. I recognize that you bit your tongue on that, and I don't want you to have to.
Oh, no. We just, that's just keeping, we've been a big fight in our community the last couple of years, pre-pandemic, about the dispensaries, closeness to schools. And it was very difficult. It was very difficult because these are our partners that we're fighting against. And it was just, and it still is, it goes on and on, it's just going to continue with all the dispensaries. And yeah, it's legal, but it's going to cause, as we all know, a slew of problems. So that's all I was going to say. We're still battling that, but our biggest problems right now are like vaping, it's huge, and suicide because of mental health, suicide tendencies. And like I said, we were going through our MiFi data in the last month, so it's been revealing, so that's all I was going to say about that. Again, I agree 100% with whoever said that about, your engaged people. We don't have a lot of volunteers. We have a lot of agency people, school people, students, parents, not so much. I mean, they're all parents, but they have their job and their passion and all those other things that we talked about already fit. This is what they want to be doing, or it fits with their mission. But volunteers, for an event, for sure. But on ongoing committees and everything, most of those people are engaged in with a, in a agency of some sort.
Thank you. I think it's important. I appreciate the stages where we can build up awareness and participation, and then help people become, our advocates in the community, and just continue to develop people as they're willing, and be there and support them, and consistently communicate the facts that are relevant and timely, in a culturally sensitive, trauma-informed way. Because when we're sharing that information about specifically the MiFi data, there's two ways you can do it. You can say, oh my gosh, this number of kids is vaping before the age of 12. Or we can say 60% of students by the age 14 have never vaped, no experience with it, right? We can highlight the positive things and say we want to support these youth making good, positive choices, participate in sharing this message out to the community, and celebrate the good choices these young people are making. Or we can say, doom and gloom, we have these problems, we need you to focus on it with us. And it depends on who your audience is. It's back to communication. And it depends on who's going to communicate that message to your audience, because different people are going to respond in different ways. So recognize who needs to be carrying that message, how that message needs to be packaged, who it's being sent to, and what the ask is. Include that follow-up of, I'm going to continue to communicate this to you, okay? Or would you like to go with me to the next activity and see what we do? Or would you be willing to lead a work group on that? Because I recognize that's a passion for you. Different levels of involvement. Maurice, did you have something to share on that?
No, I'm sorry. I was driving at the moment. I was trying to think if I put the button. I apologize.
No, you are perfectly all right. I just wanted to check in. Drive safe. We're coming close to the end here, and I really want to encourage people to recognize that you matter. And I don't want you to think about that as a statement that I'm just throwing out there. I genuinely believe it. And I want to ask, what do you notice happening in this picture? Kelly, can you describe for us what you see in this picture?
Looks like a wonderful day of self-care. I see a man smiling and getting his fingers in the dirt and just enjoying himself.
Wanda, what do you see?
See a person nourishing and growing something, starting it, nourishing it, growing it, and attending to it.
Yeah, those are good words, good words. Lauren, what do you see?
I know for what the other two said, and you can just see how much he enjoys doing it as well.
I chose this picture to share with you because he's in what I see is this person is repotting this plant. He's moving something from one place to another because it's kept growing. And there are several different things growing here and happening, and recognize that change is a part of growth. And oftentimes we have a lot of turnover. And when that happens, it's not always a bad thing. When we're talking about sustainability, in order for us to be able to successfully keep growing as individuals, move on to other tasks, change our roles, we need to have that structure in place. We need to have the tools in place. We need to have people who know how to use those tools. And so communication, not just about our message, but about how we do things. We need to continue to document how we make our choices and why we make those choices, so that the next group of people that comes through doesn't have to recreate that. They can refresh it, they can take a look at it and bring their own lens, their own perspective, and absolutely change what we've done in the past. But we need to have some sort of structure created so that when we grow, when we continue to change our environments around us, we need to have that structure so that the people who could come along next know what to do. If we don't have that, everyone is going to start out just continuing to recreate the wheel. And that's not effective, that's not efficient. And oftentimes, when we're talking about prevention coalitions in Michigan, we're talking about one or two people in a relatively small geographic area. And so one of the ways that I want to encourage us to keep growing is to find a mentor, be a mentor, find your cohort. And I would encourage each of us to identify a mentor, someone who can, help cultivate, help grow, help us prune, help us weed, whatever's going on in our coalitions, in our substance misuse communities. When we're talking about these things, find someone who is outside of your agency, outside of your organization, because you are going to encounter challenges that people within your organization have become blind to. People within your geographic region have become blind to. They don't recognize it as a problem because it's always been that way. And so I want to take a minute and encourage you to think of one or two people that you could ask to be a mentor, or if anybody already has a mentor, talk about maybe why you chose that person, or did they choose you, and figure out and recognize that we're not meant to do this by ourselves. We can talk about sustainability and communication and building partnerships all we want, but if you don't do some self-care, if you don't recognize that you need to continue to grow, things around you will stagnate, and that's not healthy for anybody. So does anybody have a mentor right now? Wanda, do you want to tell us why anything about that relationship as it beneficial? Why you chose that person?
And actually the person did choose me. Just saying that she had been watching me from a distance. She's seen some of the things that I have been involved in and how she sees that my growth and also areas that she could help me to grow in. So, and she has been very instrumental sharing some of her past and how she dealt and reflecting on some of the things that she had experienced and how it helped her to grow, and sharing that with me and giving me guidance and directions in subtle ways, and not always. And since she said that to me, it's not always what she say to me. Now I watch her. So there's things that I watch that she do to learn from her as well. So it's not even always about everything she say and show me, but just because she came to me, now I find myself watching her, learning from her as well. How she handles situations, her approach, the way she word things, how she, like you were saying, and draw people into being involved, how she praise people for what they do. And I noticed that it makes people not have a problem when she asks them to do something. They're more than willing to do it because of the way her approach with it. So just learning that and how to apply it and use it myself.
When we're fertilizing, we're liberally praising people for the wonderful things they're doing. We talk about this with youth is an ideal ratio of praise to corrective comments is 8-to-1. We need to be out there praising people and recognizing when they do things well, because then not just so we can get what we want, but because then we create a culture around us where people are willing to take risks, where they're willing to share. And that's what we need to do if we want to keep growing as a coalition, is to, break down those barriers, break down that stigma, break down those cliques and say, it's not about me. I recognize what you're doing and I want to celebrate that. And that's powerful when you're talking about prevention, when you're talking about coalition building, when you're talking about building partnerships. I love that. Thank you so much for being willing to share one. Anybody else?
I think just real quick, when we first got the drug-free communities grants, we met Liz Lentz, and we were at the CADCA seminar or training, and we've been friends ever since. And it was nice to have a person in the exact same place, different community, but to bounce ideas off of and go over the grant. And really it was, and I wouldn't say it was a mentor, it was definitely a partnership, but it was mutually beneficial for both of us, for our coalition and for her coalition. And, even with questions about, whatever it was nice to have other people like this group, to have other people you could ask.
That's the second part here is find a mentor, find your cohort. You are not alone in going through what you are going through. There are other people around the state, around the nation, who are encountering the same challenges with vaping, encountering the same challenges with mental health and suicidal ideation within our students, who are encountering the same challenges with funding streams and systems not being in place to support prevention. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
So
I was going to share a strange story that I should have known all my life, but I didn't. And she turned out to be my greatest mentor and support system. I didn't know my auntie worked in mental health for 40 years. And she follows me on Facebook, and I went to a couple of seminars that Valerie Cunningham put on for awareness of mental health and stigma attached to it in the African community. And she was very interested, reached out to me. And that was 3 years ago. And now, every time she sees an event or sees me in the paper, she calls me and gives me advice. And I can call her and ask her challenging questions when I run into certain types of behavior in individuals in our community to see if she's had a contact with similar situations. And it's been very helpful in my work. I just thought I'd share that.
thank you for sharing that. It's surprising how people sometimes who are close to us just don't share because we've never asked. So I'm so pleased to hear that 3 years ago you started in that new part of that relationship with somebody you've known for years.
Yeah, and it's wild because she stays all the way in Georgia.
Oh yeah. So Joel, I want to throw it back to you to wrap up. We've just got a minute left, and I wanted to see if you had any closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. You mentioned structure just a few minutes ago, and for me, I'm all about structure, and that's for me what sustainability speaks to, because of what I've seen and how structure impacts sustainability of effort for coalitions, advisory councils, task force boards. I can go on and on, work groups, committees. For me, practical application tools are the key, and I know I won't be here for the 23rd meeting, but I did want to mention, and maybe you can walk through those things specifically at the next workshop. But I have an annual report template with instructions that helps people consider an annual report for their coalition and community efforts. I have a sustainability checklist that is a very easy to do for an executive committee to walk through and consider what things they need to prioritize and consider surrounding their coalition structure and functioning moving forward. I also have a coalition site review checklist that is almost an audit. So it's a really nice way to look at your coalition top down and understand what components, what elements are potentially missing, what elements, what components, what characteristics can you build on going forward. It's not saying you have to have everything. It's saying this is the ideal, and these are the things to consider as you're building and sustaining the structure and functioning of your coalition. So that's all I really wanted to say, and I can share those. Ruth has those, or I can share those, and we can get those out to folks. That's also what I provide, and provide time for community coalitions to work through in the PPC 101 and 201 trainings. So they come out with actual movement around their coalition and things that they can take back and run with. So thank you again. Great to see everybody. Great content throughout.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stick around. If you have questions, we can